At Nu 900, on February 26, 1945, Private First Class Douglas Jacobson crouched behind a ridge of volcanic stone on the western side of Hill 382, watching as the bazooka team in front of him came under fire from a Japanese 20mm anti-aircraft gun. He was 19 years old, had fought through 3 island campaigns, and had earned not a single decoration. Hill 382 had been reinforced by the Japanese with 16 hardened positions, each one built to cut down Marines with interlocking fields of fire. Jacobson had joined the Marine Corps Reserve at 17, lying about his age so he could get into the war. Before that, he worked as a draftsman for his father in Port Washington, New York, and spent his summers lifeguarding on Long Island beaches. Now he belonged to Company I, 3rd Battalion, 23rd Marines, 4th Marine Division, pinned on the most fortified high ground on Iwo Jima. The island itself was 8 square miles of volcanic ash and death. 5 days earlier, 30,000 Marines had hit the beaches expecting minimal resistance. Intelligence had been disastrously, fatally wrong. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, the Japanese commander, had spent 8 months transforming Iwo Jima into an unbreakable fortress. There were 18 kilometers of tunnels, concealed artillery, concrete pillboxes, and Hill 380, rising as the tallest point north of Mount Suribachi, was the linchpin of the entire defensive network. Marines called this area the meat grinder. It was not a figure of speech. In the 7 days since landing, the 23rd Marines had already lost nearly half their men. Company after company tried to seize Hill 382, and every attack ended the same way. Japanese gunners held their fire until Marines were exposed in the open, then cut them down from positions untouched by pre-invasion bombardment. Sherman tanks burned. Flamethrower operators were killed before they ever got close. Whole squads simply disappeared into the ash. Hill 380. 2 rows 125 feet above the black volcanic beaches. The Japanese had carved its summit into a tangled network of connected bunkers and firing positions. Every approach was controlled by 57mm anti-tank guns. Machine gun nests dominated the flanks. Light tanks were dug into crevices, invisible until they opened fire. And at the foot of the hill, a 20mm anti-aircraft gun raked the open ground with lethal precision. Jacobson watched the 2-man bazooka team push forward. The loader carried 4 M6A3 rockets in a canvas bag, while the gunner held the launcher, a steel tube 4.5 feet long, weighing 13 pounds. They advanced about 15 yards before the anti-aircraft gun cut loose. Both Marines went down, and the bazooka dropped into the ash. Company I was pinned. Unless that anti-aircraft gun was taken out, the entire assault would fall apart. In the first 30 minutes alone, the company had already suffered 17 killed and 26 wounded. The Japanese defenders were ghosts. Any rock might hide a rifle pit. Any hollow could mask a machine gun nest. Marines were dying without ever spotting who was firing at them. Jacobson stared at the bazooka lying exposed in the open. It was a weapon meant for 2 men, one to aim and fire, the other to load the rocket and attach the electrical ignition wire. No one used a bazooka alone. The backblast could injure a solo operator. The weight made 1-man handling nearly impossible, and reloading under fire required teamwork. But both men were dead. If you want to see how Jacobson's decision played out, hit that like button. It helps us share these forgotten stories with more people. And subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Jacobson. The anti-aircraft gun spat another burst. 3 more Marines fell. Company I had been fighting across Hill 382 for over an hour. The Japanese positions felt impenetrable. Higher command was watching, and failure here meant failure along the entire 4th Marine Division front. Beyond Hill 382 lay the amphitheater, Turkey Knob, and the shattered remains of Minami Village, each one packed with enemy guns. Jacobson seized his rifle and moved toward the fallen bazooka. The volcanic ash offered no cover at all. Japanese riflemen had unobstructed lines of sight. 1 Marine had already attempted to retrieve the weapon. He made it barely 5 yards before a sniper cut him down. Jacobson kept advancing. He reached the bazooka, grabbed it, and found 4 rockets still in the dead loader's bag. He slung the canvas pouch over his shoulder and hefted the launcher, 13 pounds of steel. 4 rockets at about 11 pounds each. 67 pounds total, and he had to sprint with it. The anti-aircraft gun tracked his movement. Jacobson ran. The gun opened up, rounds slicing the air inches from his head. He dove behind a cluster of shattered rocks, roughly 30 yards from the Japanese emplacement. Volcanic dust coated his uniform. The bazooka tube was already hot from the morning sun. He had never operated a bazooka alone. Training drilled a strict sequence. Gunner in position. Loader inserts the rocket from the rear. Loader hooks the ignition wire to the contact spring. Loader taps the gunner's helmet. Gunner checks that the backblast area is clear. Gunner fires. The whole procedure required 2 trained Marines working in sync. Jacobson had no loader. He set the tube on the ground and pulled an M6A3 rocket from the bag, 19 inches long, carrying a shape-charged warhead with 1.6 pounds of high explosive. 6 folding fins tucked against the body. He slid the rocket into the tube's rear until it locked. Then he unwound the coiled wire from the rocket's tail and wrapped it around the launcher's contact spring. His hands moved quickly. The Japanese crew already knew someone was hiding behind the rocks. They were adjusting their aim. Jacobson hoisted the launcher onto his shoulder. The weight nearly toppled him. He steadied the tube with his left hand, gripped the wooden stock and trigger assembly with his right. The ladder sight was marked for 100, 200, 300, and 400 yards. He judged the anti-aircraft gun to be about 80 yards away. The rear of the tube was open when he fired. The backblast would erupt in a cone of superheated gas stretching nearly 15 meters. Anyone behind him would be burned alive, but no one was there. He was completely alone. He rose from cover, aimed, and squeezed the trigger. The circuit closed. The rocket motor ignited inside the tube, and the M6A3 blasted forward at 80 meters per second. Fire and smoke burst from both ends of the launcher. Recoil was minimal, but the shockwave slammed his ears. The rocket crossed 80 yards in a single second and smashed into the anti-aircraft gun's shield dead center. The shaped charge detonated. A jet of molten copper punched through the armor at 6,000 meters per second. The warhead exploded. Gun and 4-man crew vanished in a flash of orange flame. Company I surged forward. Jacobson hit the ground, reloaded, and repeated the entire process alone. He pulled a second rocket from the bag, locked it into the tube, connected the ignition wire, and raised the launcher again. The entire reload took Jacobson around 40 seconds. A trained 2-man crew could have done it in 12. 2 Japanese machine gun nests opened up from farther up the slope. They had been waiting for the Marines to push forward, and now their opening burst cut down 3 men. Company I flattened itself against the ground again. Jacobson spotted the muzzle flashes. Both guns were dug into earth-covered emplacements, about 70 yards uphill. From the front, they were invisible, only their firing gave them away. He shifted right, angling to flank the first nest. Broken volcanic rock offered partial cover. The machine gun was focused on suppressing the main Marine advance. Jacobson got within roughly 40 yards of the position. He could now see the barrels sweeping left and right. He brought the bazooka to his shoulder, aimed and fired. The rocket hit the dirt and rock covering the emplacement, punched through, and detonated. The gun and its crew disappeared in the blast. Dirt and debris rained down the slope. The second machine gun immediately rotated toward him, but Jacobson was already moving. He dove into a shallow depression as bullets shredded the air where he had just been standing. His ears rang from the backblast. 2 rockets remained. The second gun was now hunting him specifically. He crawled about 20 yards to the left. The Japanese crew was trying to locate him, firing bursts at possible hiding spots. Jacobson waited for a pause, likely a reload, then rose, shouldered the launcher. The gun crew spotted him and swung the barrel. Jacobson fired first. The rocket smashed into the gun mount. The explosion was smaller but effective. The machine gun went silent. He saw 1 wounded Japanese soldier crawl from the wreckage. A Marine rifleman from company I shot him. 3 targets down, 13 still left. But now Jacobson faced a much bigger obstacle. Directly ahead, blocking the route to the summit, stood a reinforced blockhouse of concrete and volcanic rock. Artillery strikes hadn't destroyed it, and inside were at least a dozen defenders armed with rifles and grenades. He had a single rocket left. The blockhouse sat 50 yards up the slope. The walls were 3 feet thick reinforced concrete overlaid with volcanic stone. The whole structure was roughly 12 by 15 feet. 1 firing slit overlooked the downslope approach, creating interlocking fields of fire with the machine guns Jacobson had just eliminated. American naval gunfire had pounded this blockhouse before the landing. 13-inch shells from battleships, 8-inch from cruisers. The walls showed burn marks and chipped concrete, but they still stood. Inside, the defenders waited with rifles ready. Jacobson's lone M6A3 rocket could penetrate armor, but concrete behaved differently. It might blow a hole, but whether that hole would neutralize the position was unclear. He needed another approach. He moved laterally across the slope, keeping low. The firing slit faced southwest, covering the Marines' primary avenue of attack. If he could reach the northern side, he might find a blind spot. The Japanese had built the defenses assuming attackers would come from the beaches. They hadn't expected a lone Marine to crawl toward them from within their own perimeter. Jacobson dragged himself 40 yards through ash and broken rock. His uniform was coated black with dust. The bazooka tube scraped against stone. Company I stayed pinned, taking sporadic fire from higher positions on Hill 382. Jacobson finally reached the northern wall of the blockhouse. No firing slits here. The structure had been built into the hillside for added protection, but the rear entrance was visible, a low opening barely 3 feet high, framed with wood. Jacobson set down the bazooka. He still had his one loaded rocket, but firing it straight into that entrance from 10 feet away would be suicide. The backblast would kill him as surely as it would the defenders. He needed the rocket for something else. He pulled a fragmentation grenade from his belt, then lifted the bazooka again and crept to within about 15 feet of the entrance. He could hear voices inside Japanese speech, at least 6 men, likely more. He aimed at the wooden frame and fired. The rocket hit it and exploded, blowing the entrance apart and collapsing part of the rear wall. Dust and smoke billowed out. Jacobson dropped the empty tube and pulled the pin on his grenade. He counted 2 seconds and tossed it into the smoking opening. The grenade detonated inside the blockhouse. Screams, then silence. Jacobson waited, then approached the firing slit and looked inside. The interior was wrecked. Bodies. Rubble. The blockhouse was neutralized. 4 targets down. 12 remaining. And now he had no rockets left. The bazooka was worthless without ammunition. He grabbed his rifle and began moving back downslope toward Company I's position. As he descended, he passed the bodies of the original bazooka team. The loader's canvas bag still lay there. Jacobson checked it empty. He looked out across the field of volcanic ash. About 200 yards back, near the point where Company I had begun the assault, Jacobson could see the supply area, ammo crates, medical kits, and stacks of bazooka rockets piled behind a low sandbag wall. The whole zone was under Japanese observation from positions higher on the ridge. Mortar fire had been dropping there on and off all morning. 3 Marines had already been killed trying to haul ammunition forward. Jacobson started toward the supply point. He stayed low, using every dip in the ground and every rock cluster for cover. Japanese snipers were active. 1 round snapped past his head. Another smacked into the ash 2 feet to his left. He reached the supply point, spotted a crate marked M6A3 rocket, and pried it open 12 rockets inside, each in a cardboard tube. He grabbed 4 and shoved them into the canvas bag he'd taken from the dead loader. A mortar round exploded 30 yards away. Shrapnel hissed overhead. Jacobson sprinted back toward the slope, bazooka tube in one hand, rocket bag in the other. Company I was still pinned down. Higher up on Hill 382, a second pillbox had opened fire. Smaller than the blockhouse, but just as lethal. A 5-man crew, heavy machine gun, perfect field of fire on the eastern approach. Jacobson loaded a fresh rocket. The pillbox sat about 90 yards uphill. He found cover behind a rock cluster and began moving toward it. The Japanese inside had watched him demolish the blockhouse. They knew exactly what was coming. The pillbox opened fire early. Too early. Jacobson was still 80 yards away when the first burst kicked up ash 10 feet to his right. They were rattled. Nervous defenders make mistakes. Jacobson zigzagged upward, using the terrain as best he could. The gunner tracked him but fired short bursts, trying to conserve ammunition. Each burst gave Jacobson a 3-second window to advance before the next one came. He covered 15 yards, then another 20. The gun suddenly fell silent, reloading. He dove into a shallow depression and raised the bazooka. The pillbox was now roughly 65 yards away. He could see the concrete box partly buried in volcanic rock. The firing slit was narrow, minimizing exposure while giving a broad field of fire, but narrow slits came with a downside, limited traverse. The machine gun could only pivot so far left or right before the barrel hit the concrete edges. Jacobson shifted right, forcing the crew to readjust. The barrel swung to follow him. He kept moving. Eventually the gun reached its maximum traverse. Firing stopped. The crew was trying to reposition the mount inside. Jacobson froze, aimed, and fired. The rocket covered the distance in under a second, slipped through the firing slit, and detonated inside. The shaped charge was designed for confined armored spaces. The effect was devastating. The blast tore outward through every opening. Fire and smoke poured from the entrance. The machine gun fell silent. He waited, nothing moved. He reloaded and advanced slowly. At 20 yards he could see inside. The 5-man crew was dead. The interior was wrecked. Spent machine gun brass littered the ground. 5 targets down. 11 remaining. Company, I was moving again. Jacobson saw Marines climbing the slope in small teams, using the positions he had already cleared as stepping stones. Progress slow, but progress. Ahead, though, the ground grew worse. The western face of Hill 382 was a chaotic maze of volcanic rock, shattered ridges, and interlocking defensive points. The Japanese had spent months preparing these defenses. Every approach was covered. Every route forward funneled attackers into kill zones. Jacobson pushed higher. 50 yards ahead, he spotted an earth-covered rifle emplacement. Not a bunker or pillbox, just a pit with overhead cover, made from logs and volcanic rock. 2 Japanese riflemen. Inside were firing down at the advancing Marines. Crude but effective. Artillery had failed to destroy it because the earth absorbed the blast. Direct fire couldn't reach it because of the angle, and the riflemen had perfect visibility across the western slope. Jacobson moved left to flank it. The emplacement was aimed downslope. The defenders weren't watching their flanks. He approached to within 40 yards, slightly above them. He loaded a rocket, angled the tube downward at the overhead cover, and fired. The rocket smashed into the log and earth roof, punched through, and detonated inside. The position collapsed. The firing stopped. 6 targets down, 10 remaining. But now Jacobson faced the most dangerous stretch of Hill 382 ahead, forming a semicircular defensive perimeter around the approach to the summit. Sat 6 interconnected positions, each one supporting the others. Rifle pits, machine gun nests, and mortar positions were all arranged carefully, each one sited to create overlapping fields of fire. This small cluster had been constructed by the Japanese as the last killing ground. Even if attackers pushed through the lower lines, this final perimeter was meant to stop them cold. The 23rd Marines had already tried to assault it twice. Both assaults had failed, leaving heavy casualties behind. Jacobson now had 3 rockets remaining and 6 separate targets. The math was unforgiving. He would run out of ammunition long before he ran out of positions to hit. He needed more rockets, and the supply point lay 300 yards behind him. The entire path back was visible from the summit, fully exposed to Japanese observers. Mortar crews had already zeroed in on the most predictable approaches. Snipers covered the open terrain, and by now the defenders inside the 6-position cluster had definitely spotted him. They'd be expecting him to return. Jacobson began moving downhill, staying inside the natural depressions, and avoiding the higher ridgelines. A mortar round landed 50 yards to his left, then another even closer. The Japanese were bracketing him. The next shot would have the range. He sprinted the final 100 yards to the supply point and grabbed 4 more rockets. A mortar round exploded 20 yards away. Shrapnel hissed overhead. He hit the ground as another round landed even closer. Then he ran back uphill, hauling 67 pounds of gear, while Japanese mortars marched shells across the slope trying to kill him. Jacobson reached the 6-position cluster at 10:30 a.m. He had been fighting for 90 straight minutes. His uniform clung to him with sweat, despite the cool February air. His ears throbbed from the bazooka's backblast, and his shoulder ached from the launcher's recoil. 4 rockets, 6 targets. He would have to choose carefully. The 6 positions formed a defensive arc about 60 yards across. They were arranged so each could cover the others. If he hit the leftmost position, the remaining ones would have unobstructed shots at him. If he approached from the center, all 6 could fire at once. The positions sat 15 to 20 yards apart, close enough to support one another, too far apart for a single rocket to take out more than one emplacement. Jacobson studied the layout. The position on the far right was a 2-man rifle pit. Next to it sat a machine gun nest partly hidden behind volcanic rock. The 3rd and 4th were mortar sites. The 5th was another rifle pit, and the 6th, on the end, was a reinforced observation post with a perfect view of the entire western slope. He made his choice: destroy the observation post first. Without their spotters, the rest of the cluster would be blind. Jacobson moved far to the right, circling outside the defensive arc. The route took him across broken terrain littered with jagged volcanic rock that tore into his uniform. The defenders were staring downslope, watching for the main Marine advance. They weren't expecting an attack from their flank. Jacobson reached a point about 70 yards from the observation post. He loaded a rocket, brought the launcher to his shoulder, and fired. The rocket smashed into the post-reinforced wall, detonating instantly. The blast collapsed one side of the structure. He reloaded at once and sent another rocket into the smoking debris. The post disintegrated completely. 2 wounded Japanese soldiers stumbled out. Advancing riflemen from company, I shot both. Jacobson didn't pause to watch. He was already moving toward the next target, the rifle pit. 2 Japanese soldiers with Arisaka rifles. They had seen the observation post go up in flames. They scanned the flanks, searching for the attacker. Jacobson was 40 yards away when one finally spotted him. The soldier raised his rifle. Jacobson dove behind cover as the shot cracked past his head. 2 rockets left, 5 targets remaining. He couldn't waste a rocket on a 2-man rifle pit. He pulled a fragmentation grenade from his belt, counted 3 seconds, then stood and threw. The grenade arced down into the pit. The explosion killed both men. 4 rockets spent, 2 grenades thrown, 8 positions destroyed, 8 more remaining. The remaining 4 positions in the cluster opened fire. Machine gun bursts ripped past Jacobson's position. Mortar teams were adjusting their aim. He caught the sharp thump of rounds leaving their tubes. He had maybe 10 seconds before they landed. He sprinted left, away from the spot where he'd just been. The mortars crashed down behind him. Shrapnel whined overhead. He kept running until he found cover behind a low ridge of volcanic rock. The machine gun in the second position was locking onto him. Short, controlled bursts disciplined fire. The gunner knew his craft. Moving meant exposing himself. Jacobson loaded his third-to-last rocket. The machine gun nest sat 50 yards away, built into a natural dip in the slope. Excellent cover, excellent fields of fire, a difficult target. He waited for the next burst, counted 5 rounds. The gunner was conserving ammunition. During the pause, Jacobson rose, aimed, and fired. The rocket struck the depression's edge and detonated. The machine gun fell silent. He couldn't tell whether he destroyed the crew or merely stunned them. He reloaded. A Japanese soldier burst from the smoking position, running toward the next rifle pit. Jacobson dropped him with his M1 Garand. 2 rockets left. 3 positions still remained in the cluster, 2 mortar pits and a single rifle pit. The mortar crews were the real threat. They were dropping shells onto Company I and keeping the Marines pinned. Jacobson moved uphill, angling toward the nearest mortar position, roughly 60 yards away. The crew was in the middle of reloading. They hadn't spotted him yet. He raised the bazooka, took aim, and fired. The rocket slammed directly into the center of the mortar pit. The explosion was enormous. The mortar tube launched skyward, spinning end over end, before crashing down 30 yards away. 2 Japanese soldiers were killed instantly. A third crawled from the ruins, his uniform burning. 1 rocket left. 2 positions to go. Jacobson reloaded his final M6A3. The second mortar pit sat 40 yards farther uphill. The rifle pit lay between him and that target. 3 soldiers in the rifle pit, 2 more in the mortar position. 5 men, 1 rocket. He made his decision. He aimed at the mortar pit and fired the last rocket. The M6A3 hit the position and detonated. The 2-man crew died where they stood. The mortar tube flipped backward, its baseplate ripped straight out of the earth. 12 positions eliminated. Only the rifle pit remained. 3 Japanese soldiers inside saw Jacobson and opened fire with their arisakas. Rounds cracked past his head. Jacobson dropped the empty bazooka tube and swung up his M1 Garand. 8 rounds in the clip. 3 targets at 40 yards. He fired. The first soldier collapsed. Fired again. The second fell backward into the pit. The third tried scrambling out to escape. Jacobson shot him in the back. The 6th position cluster was gone. 13 enemy emplacements neutralized since 900. The route to Hill 382's summit was finally open. Company I began pushing past the positions Jacobson had cleared. The Marines advanced in small elements, weapons up, expecting a counterattack. But the Japanese line had already fractured. The positions Jacobson had destroyed were the keystones. Without them, the defenders farther up the hill were cut off. Jacobson scanned downslope. To his left, across a shallow ravine, another Marine company was pinned. He could make out Marines huddled behind rocks, unable to move. They were taking heavy fire from a position he couldn't see from his angle. The company belonged to the 24th Marines, fighting in support of the 23rd's assault. They had attempted to climb the eastern route toward Hill 382, while Company I advanced from the west. Something had stopped them cold. The entire company was stuck 200 yards from the summit. Jacobson had no rockets left, but he could see what was halting their movement. A pillbox, poured concrete and volcanic stone, built into the hillside overlooking the eastern approach. Its firing slit pointed straight down the ravine, creating a killing field no Marine could cross. Jacobson grabbed the empty bazooka tube and began moving downslope toward the supply point again. His legs burned. His shoulder throbbed from repeated recoil. He had been fighting almost 2 hours without water. The supply point had shifted forward. Marines had hauled ammunition crates higher up the slope as Company I advanced. Jacobson located the new point behind a cluster of rocks 70 yards below. More M6A3 rockets. He loaded 4 into the canvas bag. Then he moved across the ravine toward the pinned company. The route forced him through open ground. Japanese snipers were still active. One shot struck the volcanic ash 2 feet to his right. Another round snapped overhead. He reached the Marine Company's position. A captain spotted him approaching with the bazooka and pointed up the slope toward the pillbox. Jacobson nodded. He had already identified the target. The pillbox sat 80 yards away, perched about 15 feet above the ravine floor. From that elevation, the defenders had flawless observation and overlapping fields of fire. The concrete structure showed no signs of damage from naval bombardment, and its firing slit was positioned to dominate every route of approach. Jacobson shifted right, climbing along the ravine's edge. The pillbox crew remained focused on the Marines directly beneath them. They were firing steady, controlled bursts from what sounded like a Type 92 heavy machine gun 7.7 millimeters, roughly 600 rounds per minute, effective out to 800 meters. At this distance, the weapon was lethal. Jacobson climbed higher, using dead ground to conceal his movement. The pillbox crew couldn't depress their gun far enough to hit targets directly below. He exploited that blind spot, moving through terrain the defenders simply couldn't cover. He reached a point 50 yards from the pillbox. Slightly below its level, he loaded a rocket. The angle was awkward. Shooting uphill reduced accuracy and effective range. But he could see the slit 3 feet wide, 18 inches tall. If he could land a rocket inside, the shaped charge would do the rest. He aimed, compensated for the upward angle, and fired. The rocket climbed, but struck the concrete wall 2 feet above the slit. It detonated, sending chunks of concrete falling, but the pillbox held. The machine gun kept firing. Jacobson reloaded, adjusted his aim lower, and fired again. This time, the rocket entered the slit and exploded inside. Fire and smoke burst from every opening. The machine gun went silent. The pillbox was finished. 14 positions down, 2 remaining. The Marine Company below advanced immediately, moving fast to capitalize on the silence. Within minutes, they were across the ravine and climbing toward the summit. But Jacobson heard something that froze him. A different noise, mechanical grinding. The unmistakable sound of an engine on tracks, clattering over volcanic rock. A Japanese tank was climbing from the eastern base of Hill 382. It was a Type 95, Heijo light tank 7 tons, diesel-powered, armed with a 37mm cannon and 2 Type 97 machine guns. Crew of 3. The Japanese had been using these tanks as mobile pillboxes on Iwo, hiding them in craters and depressions where naval gunfire couldn't reach. This one was working its way up the eastern slope, grinding through ash at roughly 8 kilometers per hour. Its turrets swept left and right, searching. The tank commander had spotted the Marine advance and was moving to block them. Jacobson watched from 70 yards away. The tank was below him, climbing a shallow draw toward the summit. Behind it, he could see the Marine Company he had just supported. They were advancing in the open, unaware of the danger. The tank halted. The turret swung toward the Marines. The 37mm gun elevated. Jacobson loaded a rocket. The Type 95 feet's armor was extremely thin, 14mm front, 12mm on the sides, only 6mm up top. The M6A3's shaped charge could punch through 100mm of armor. The tank was vulnerable from any direction. But tanks were still dangerous targets, even light ones. This crew was trained, and if Jacobson missed, they would turn the guns on him. He aimed at the turret. The commander was visible through the open hatch, searching for targets. Jacobson fired. The rocket struck the turret's left side and detonated. The shaped charge ripped through the thin armor and exploded inside. The turret mechanism jammed. Smoke poured from the hatch. The engine kept grinding, but the main gun could no longer traverse. The tank was crippled but not finished. The machine guns were still active when open fire, spraying the slope. Marines dove for cover. Jacobson reloaded. The tank was trying to reverse, backing down the draw to escape. The driver had no line of sight on. Jacobson's position, the jammed turret, blocked his view uphill. Jacobson moved left, flanking the vehicle. He reached a spot 60 yards away with a clean angle on the rear armor of the engine compartment, only 6mm thick. He aimed and fired. The rocket slammed into the engine deck, penetrating easily. The explosion was immediate. Diesel ignited. Flames roared out of the engine bay and into the crew compartment through the jammed turret ring. 2 Japanese crewmen bailed out, their uniforms burning. Marine riflemen fired again, striking both targets. The tank went up in flames, sending thick black smoke curling into the morning sky. 15 positions were already wiped out. Only 1 remained. Jacobson still had a single rocket. He looked toward the crest of Hill 382. The last Japanese strongpoint was now clearly in sight, a large blockhouse, bigger than the others, with concrete walls and several firing slits. It dominated the approach to the summit. If he could eliminate it, Hill 382 would fall. He began the climb. The incline was sharp, and the volcanic ash slid under his boots with every step. He was drained 2 straight hours of fighting, 67 pounds of gear, no water, no pause. Behind him, Company I and the Marines from the 24th pushed forward together. They had finally linked up in the ravine below. Their combined strength was maybe 80 men, just enough to seize the summit once that final blockhouse was dealt with. Jacobson reached a spot roughly 40 yards from the structure. Through the firing slits, he could see movement Japanese soldiers inside, at least half a dozen, maybe more. They were armed with rifles and grenades, and they knew he was advancing. The blockhouse had been engineered to survive naval gunfire. Its walls were 4 feet thick, reinforced concrete blended with volcanic rock. Layers of earth and stone covered the roof. Even a direct hit from a 16-inch battleship gun had failed to knock it out. He had 1 rocket. He studied the target. The firing slits were too narrow. He couldn't rely on threading a rocket through one. A miss would send the rocket exploding against the exterior wall. That might scar the concrete, but it wouldn't put the defenders out of action, and they'd kill him before he could reload. He needed another angle. Jacobson shifted right, working his way around toward the rear of the blockhouse. The path exposed him completely. The Japanese inside spotted him through the firing slits and opened up. Rifle rounds snapped past his head. He dove behind a pile of rocks. From this new position, he spotted the entrance reinforced door, steel frame with wooden planking. It faced away from the main American assault. The Japanese hadn't expected anyone to reach this side. Jacobson loaded his last rocket, aimed at the doorway, and fired. The rocket slammed into the steel frame and detonated. The door blew inward, part of the entryway collapsing. Smoke and dust poured out. Jacobson dropped the bazooka tube, pulled his M1 Garand, grabbed 2 grenades from his belt, and sprinted toward the smoking breach. He hurled the first grenade inside. The blast thundered through the structure. He tossed the second, another explosion. Then he moved in with his rifle ready. Inside was chaos, smoke, debris, bodies. Several Japanese soldiers were wounded from the blasts. Jacobson fired, advancing room by room. The fighting was brutal and close. Some corners devolved into hand-to-hand combat. His Garand ran empty. He drew his pistol and pressed on. Within 2 minutes, the blockhouse was silent. 16 enemy positions destroyed. 75 Japanese defenders killed. 30 minutes of non-stop action, from 0900 to 0900. 30, followed by another hour and a half clearing positions up the slope. Private First Class Douglas Jacobson, only 19, had shattered the Japanese line on Hill 382. Behind him, Company I reached the summit. Marines poured through the break Jacobson had created. By noon, the 23rd Marines controlled the high ground. By 1300, they were sweeping the reverse slope. Hill 382, centerpiece of the Japanese defensive network on Iwo Jima, had fallen. The cost was devastating. Company I alone lost 43 men killed or wounded. The 23rd Marines as a whole had taken 50% casualties since landing on February 19, but the hill was in American hands now. At 1400, Jacobson walked back down the slope. His uniform was torn, his face coated in volcanic ash and powder residue. He carried the empty bazooka tube. A Navy corpsman checked him over cuts, bruises, dehydration, but nothing serious. Someone asked how he'd managed to do it. Jacobson said he wasn't sure. He just wanted to get off that hill. The fighting on Iwo Jima continued for another 3 weeks. The island wasn't declared secure until March 16. 6,821 Marines were killed, 17,000 wounded. Out of the 21,000 Japanese defenders, only 216 surrendered. 27 Marines and sailors received the Medal of Honor on Iwo Jima, more than in any other single American battle. Douglas Jacobson was promoted to corporal in April 1945. He returned stateside that September, reporting to headquarters Marine Corps in Washington. On October 5, 1945, President Harry Truman awarded him the Medal of Honor during a White House ceremony. Jacqueline Lucas, the youngest Medal of Honor recipient from Iwo Jima, received his award that same day. Jacobson was discharged in December 1945, then re-enlisted the following April. He went through officer candidate school at Quantico, earned his commission as a second lieutenant in March 1954, and served tours in Japan, Okinawa, China, and Vietnam. Before he retired, his commanding officer told him he was the only Marine Corps officer without a high school diploma. Jacobson took the JET exam, passed it, and received his diploma in 1967. He He retired as a major after 24 years of service. He settled in New Jersey, became a real estate agent, and married a teacher he had met while stationed in Okinawa. In 1987, he moved to Florida, where he spoke of the war only when people asked. Douglas Jacobson passed away on August 20, 2000, in Port Charlotte, Florida, congestive heart failure and pneumonia. He was 74. He rests in Arlington National Cemetery. The state of Florida named a veterans nursing facility after him, the Douglas T. Jacobson State Veterans Nursing Home in Port Charlotte, still caring for veterans who walked the same road he once did. 16 enemy positions, 75 defenders, 30 minutes, 1 Marine. 1 bazooka meant for a 2-man crew. Hill 382 fell because Douglas Jacobson simply refused to stop. If this story moved you like it moved us, please hit that like button. Every like tells YouTube to push this story to more people. Tap subscribe, turn on notifications. We're uncovering forgotten history from dusty archives every single day. Stories of Marines who saved their companies with weapons designed for two. Real people. Real heroism. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from: the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia. Our community stretches around the globe. You're not just a viewer. You're helping keep these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if anyone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for helping ensure Douglas Jacobson is never lost to silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you are helping make that happen.